so much going on. Betsy DeVos is in the crosshairs. Donald Trump says the dishonest press doesn't report terrorist attacks properly. Meanwhile, some folks on the left say it's time to impeach Donald Trump. He's been president long enough. And if you didn't know it, your TV's probably been watching you for the last several years. It's a good chance. Plus, a new supermarket. Sans employees. Yeah, a new supermarket that nobody needs to work at except for a couple of people. On the program today, Stephen Moore, the economist and the mastermind of Donald Trump's economic plan, will join us. Dr. John Lott will be here. Seton Motley, Senator Rick Jones, Congressman Dan Kildee of Michigan's 5th District, a Democrat. Yes, they come here, too, to play. It's all ahead today in one handy-dandy reusable package we like to call The Steve Gruber Show.
This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting at all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Long education.
Yeah, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
All right, it's Tuesday, and I'm glad to have you aboard for the conversation because we want to have a long conversation today about the factors that are affecting you and I today. We'll get to Betsy DeVos and Donald Trump on terror attacks and Donald Trump on rebuilding the military. All of those things will come. But I want to start in California because as goes California, oftentimes goes America. And this ought to frighten you. Remember, the things that you tolerate today, your children will embrace tomorrow. The things that you are willing to tolerate and say, I can put up with that, even though you may not like it. When you sit there and say nothing, if you tolerate that, your kids will embrace it, and your grandkids for sure. Think about that. But all of this conversation about illegal aliens here and the benefits they get while people like our veterans are sitting on the sidelines getting nothing. And it's always about the human factor. Well, they're moms and they're this and they're that and they're just trying to have a better life and keep their families together. Well, don't burglars and thieves and white-collar criminals and murderers, for that fact, don't they have families too? Shouldn't we worry about their families? Or is it just the fact that they come here from another country that gives them special privilege in the eyes of the left? Well, it seems to me that this next bit of sound you're going to hear is a real eye-opener. You see, in testimony provided before the California Senate's Public Safety Committee, California, by the way, trying to become the first sanctuary state. In this testimony provided before the California Senate's Public Safety Committee, Senate President Pro Tem Kevin DeLeon, a Democrat from Los Angeles, decided to tell the truth. He decided to tell the truth in front of the committee that half of his family, is here in America illegally and in the possession of illegal, falsified paperwork like Social Security cards, driver's licenses, and green cards, all fraudulently created, breaking more laws to stay in America. And if you don't believe me, why don't we just go ahead and listen to Mr. DeLeon's comments in front of the Public Safety Committee this week. Here it is. Kevin DeLeon.
The reality is, with the executive order and the criteria that has been developed, any individual, I can tell you half of my family would be eligible for deportation under the executive order. Because if they got a false Social Security card, if they got a false identification, if they got a false driver's license prior to us passing AB 60, if they got a false green card, and anyone who has family members, who are undocumented knows that almost entirely everybody has secured some sort of false identification. That's what you need to survive, to work. They are eligible for massive deportation.
Well, that's right. If you come here to America and you get yourself false green cards, false Social Security cards, false driver's licenses, yes, you'd be eligible for deportation. And you know what's crazy about this for Mr. DeLeon He's also one of the folks that has the audacity to say, yeah, but there's no voting by illegals in America. That really doesn't. Half his family is eligible for deportation because they have false fabricated driver's license, social security cards, green cards, all sorts of paperwork because, as he puts it, that's what you need to survive as an illegal. That's what you need to survive. But no, they would never take their voter registration card and actually use it. I mean, that's just crazy talk. The quote came from a hearing being held on SB 54, a California Senate bill introduced by De Leon that would make the entire state of California a sanctuary state. It's unbelievable. Of course, in a follow-up interview with Larry Mantle of KPCC, De Leon was pressed but minimized the problems associated not only with illegally crossing the border, but also committing multiple other federal crimes related to identity theft. Because what often happens is when that Social Security number disappears, somebody's identity disappears. And somebody like you or I, who's already living in the country legally, have to go spend thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours trying to correct the problem of identity theft. He went on to say, someone simply who received or purchased a Social Security card down at MacArthur Park or elsewhere in my district would be eligible immediately for mass deportation. Yeah, that'd be part of the deal. He's trying to deputize police officers, and with the suspicion of someone being a criminal or having a broken taillight, that they themselves, as a local police officer, could call the ICE agencies immediately to have that person deported without even legal due process. Well, that's kind of the way it goes. First of all, this is the way this is absurdity. And he went on to say, the vast majority of immigrants, hard-working immigrants, because they're all hard-working, none of them are bums, by the way. All immigrants are hard-working, God-fearing, law-abiding, well, except for the part that they got here illegally and then created false identification. Other than that, they're law-abiding. And, of course, they might vote, but that doesn't happen. I can tell you I have family members specifically who came here as undocumented immigrants, and they did the same thing. That's what you need to do to survive in this economy. And then in a conversation with a guy running the program there at that KPCC, Larry Mantle, he objected. He said, but of course the problem is I know people, too, have had their Social Security numbers and identities stolen as a result of that. Meanwhile, Donald Trump blasting California's sanctuary state bill during his interview with Bill O'Reilly, saying that he doesn't want to defund anybody, but failure to enforce federal laws would require defunding to be used as a weapon to force them into compliance. And I think that's what he has to do. That's what presidents do. It's what Jimmy Carter did to force people to lower the speed limit and lower the drinking age in America, to enforce federal law. Yeah. So there you go. There you go. We'll play that again later, but I'll have that posted on the Facebook page. Yeah. I can tell you half of my family would be eligible for deportation, almost entirely. Everybody has secured some sort of false identification, but other than that, they are law-abiding people. Don't you worry about it. It's all good. 14 after on the Steve Gruber Show.
Michigan, born and raised with Midwestern values and Michigan common sense.
Coming up a little bit later on the program, we're going to talk about the television that's been spying on you. Trust me. Plus, Amazon's plan for a brand new 10,000 square foot supermarket that'll have exactly 3 human beings inside. The rest will be robotics. Seriously, how's that make robotics? No question. We'll get to that. Big day on Capitol Hill today. A U.S. federal appeals court will be hearing arguments over President Trump's controversial temporary ban, so he'll be watching closely. They'll be determining whether Donald Trump's order should be restored after last week's federal judge ruling. That 6-page decision, which was weak to say the least. The filing with the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals came 3 days after a federal judge in Washington halted Trump's order and granted a nationwide stay. The Justice Department said U.S. District Judge Jane Robarts' order was vastly overbroad. It was. And said Trump's executive order was a lawful exercise of the president's authority over the entry of aliens into the United States and the admission of refugees. It is. And whether it's Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman, or Barack Obama, all of those presidents, by the way, exercising this same control over who comes here, immigrants, refugees, no matter who comes here. Now, see, the problem is you've got some conflict between the 1952 immigration law and an update made in 1965. The appeals court refused to immediately reinstate the ban, and lawyers for Washington and Minnesota, two states challenging it, argued anew yesterday that any resumption would unleash chaos, separating families and stranding university students. I will grant you this, that the Trump administration was clumsy at best, reckless at worst, in rolling this thing out. If you're going to roll something out, you need to be prepared. This one looked like a bunch of rookies. Which brings me back to Kellyanne Conway. Listen, I like Kellyanne. She's run a heck of a campaign. She won for her candidate, first woman in American history to run a national campaign and win. But I think it's time for Kellyanne Conway to take a break. I do. I think it's time for Kellyanne to take a break. She needs a vacation. Every time I see Omarosa out there as a spokesperson, I think that she is terrific. And she'd send a heck of a signal to the world. You know, strong black woman out there, well-dressed, well-spoken, fielding every question. I think that the optics of that are spectacular. Donald Trump is a marketing genius, right? You got to give him credit for the way he won. So he's a marketing genius. Well, it's time to give Kellyanne a break for a while. She wasn't hired to be the spokesman for the White House. She's hired to be a senior advisor, I believe. My 2 cents. There it is, all right? Betsy DeVos is going to be back front and center today. Get past all the noise in the opposition to DeVos. That's Donald Trump's pick for education secretary, of course, from Michigan. And the bottom line is it's all about the teachers' unions, which consider it their right, their God-given right, to have a union person in charge of the education department. And the 2 Senate Republicans that have come out against DeVos, that's right, they've gotten tons of money. Murkowski from Alaska and Snow from Maine, both of those women have gotten tons of money from the teachers' unions. That's just the way it is. Meanwhile, as the vote comes close, Senate Democrats are in their last-ditch effort to convince one more Republican to vote against her, just one, which would block her confirmation. The leader of the pack, Senator Patty Murray of Washington, Democrat, ranking member of the Senate committee charged with overseeing DeVos's confirmation, and a person in lockstep with the teachers' unions. She had some things to say about it. It's clip 5 from Patty Murray. Clip 5, go.
So, Madam President, I come to the floor today to kick off the final day of debate on this nomination. Now, I spoke at length on Friday, making my case for why the Senate should oppose Betsy DeVos. And Democrats will hold the floor for the next 24 hours until the final vote to do everything we can to persuade just one more Republican to join us. And I strongly encourage people across the country to join us. Double down on your advocacy. Keep making your voices heard.
Well, keep making your voices heard, but Betsy DeVos likely to be confirmed a little bit later today. We'll see if there is one more defection. That would be a disappointment for Donald Trump. Pretty rarely are cabinet selections denied. But in this hyper-partisan atmosphere that we live in, well, these things can happen. Meanwhile, the conservative movement is alive and well and moving across the country. Republican Governor Eric Greitens of Missouri, who was on this program, by the way, a year before he was elected. Most incredible Rhodes Scholar, Navy SEAL, incredible individual. He signed legislation yesterday making Missouri the latest right-to-work state as the movement sets its sights next on New Hampshire. hoping to break into one of the labor union's last remaining strongholds, the big labor wall. Legislation advancing in New Hampshire, if approved, would make the state the first in the Northeast to go right to work. The measure, which bars unions from forcing employees to join or pay dues, set for a vote in the State House next week after passing in the state Senate. The push is the latest sign of labor unions' diminishing clout and how Republican gains at the state level are having a broad impact on policy. Amid support for legislation from the Trump White House. Of course, you remember the battle in Michigan. Right to work. It was going to ruin everything, said the Democrats. Well, looks like things are alive and well. In Missouri, the new Republican declared Monday on Twitter that his state is open for business. It became the 28th state with a right-to-work policy and a right-to-work law on the books. He says it's about more jobs. Missouri ready to work and the state open for business. So says Governor Eric Greitens in Missouri. Good friend of us here at the program. Going to take a quick break. You're listening to a Tuesday edition of the Steve Gruber Show. Thanks for stopping in.
Delivering Michigan common sense with a big dose of truth and honesty.
All right. 45 after. Stephen Moore, fascinating individual. We hope to have him back sometime soon. The architect of Donald Trump's vision for America when it comes to the economy and so forth. So good conversation to have that we will continue. Of course, you know by now that last week Donald Trump unveiled and introduced his pick for the Supreme Court, Neil Gorsuch. Neil Gorsuch is an extremely conservative individual, impeccable record from Colorado, a pro-gun judge, which was a big driving force for sure for voters in places like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. The question is, what does our next guest think about this selection? Dr. John Lott, the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. You can find out more about John Lott anytime at crimeresearch.org. Doctor, welcome back to the program.
Great to talk to you.
So Neil Gorsuch, here's a guy who's been around for, well, about a decade, I suppose, has had some cases that you can review, find out what his judicial thinking is. You've got to be pretty pleased.
I am. I think some people are trying to read in more into cases than are actually there, but I think the bottom line with respect to him is that he adheres to precedents. He doesn't, he doesn't let his own personal political views shape how he's going to be ruling on cases.
Yeah, and that's critical. When you look at the gun cases, this pro-gun record that he has, certainly this is disappointing to the Democrats who call this guy, well, they call him all sorts of things, as you can imagine. But the last time through, he won 95-0. He got votes from people like Senator Obama, Senator Clinton, Senator Kerry, and the list goes on and on. Senator Schumer was on the list. But these are all people that now say, maybe he's a radical pick, I suppose. I don't get it. I guess it's just politics.
Right. Well, they're going to have to twist themselves into some types of pretzels or something in order to, explain why they're going to be opposing him now on these things. Obviously, they didn't think that he was radical at that time. And the thing is, if you look at these cases that he's decided, it's clear, even when he's disagreed politically with the policy outcomes that are there, he still made the ruling that, and you think in many ways that should please the Democrats. I mean, he's not somebody out there who's going to, given that he is conservative, make decisions based on whether he agrees with the policy or not. So, you have cases like a discrimination case involving someone who's a homosexual who had gotten fired because of their sexual preferences there. And, he protected them. He said that was the law and it was precedent that was there, so he followed it. You have other cases like a gun case where he had questions about whether or not the past decisions were correct. You have this issue of whether somebody knows that they're committing a crime. You had a felon who didn't know that he was a felon because he had gotten a deferred punishment. And so he thought that the fact that it was deferred mean that he wasn't actually classified as a felon for some period of time. Basically, the penalty was deferred, and that if he made it a certain amount of time, 6 months or whatever, that his record would be expunged. But he didn't realize that during that 6-month period of time that he would be banned from owning a gun. And so in that case, Gorsuch, in his decision, said that he had real questions about the past decisions that courts had made. He said that, in his view, you had to go and show that somebody actually knew that they were committing a crime in order to punish them. But he said his personal views were kind of irrelevant on that. Past courts had interpreted the term knowing quite differently, and so even though he had logical questions, he felt bound by past decisions, and so he had the individual convicted of a gun crime for possessing a gun while he was a felon there.
So of course, the left is screaming that, he's going to allow all felons to have guns. Not the case at all. He's merely saying you need to have knowledge of what you've been accused of, and it has to be clear to somebody. Go on. Well,
but he's not even saying that. He's saying that he didn't think that the courts had made the decisions correctly in the past, but he felt bound by the precedents that the courts had made in those decisions in the past, and so he, even though he didn't think that they had logically made the right decision, he was still going to vote based upon what they had decided. So, I mean, it's hard for me to see how Democrats could object to that. He has a brief discussion saying, look, when Congress wrote the law, they said knowing, and the way the courts had interpreted this wasn't knowing that he had committed a crime, but just simply knowing that he had a gun. So, and he said, well, knowing probably included whether or not they were allowed to have a gun or not. But he said, look, my views are irrelevant here. The courts have clearly stated what they interpret this law as meaning, and he felt bound by precedent. So why? I know a number of people want to go and say, well, that proves he's pro-gun ownership, but at the same time, what it really shows, I think, is that he's not going to go by his own personal views.
I think it's great.
Bound by what precedents are.
Yeah. We got to leave it right there. Great explanation, Doctor. Great explanation of Neil Gorsuch. Appreciate your time as always.
Great talking to you. Thanks.
Dr. John Lott, president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. Find out more at crimeresearch.org.
This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Been a long education.
Yeah, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
All right, it's Tuesday. Tuesday and time to take a look at some different things. As you know, the Court of Appeals, the Ninth Circuit, will look at Donald Trump's travel ban on the 7 nations. That'll happen later today. Betsy DeVos her nomination to be Education Secretary come down to the wire today. Looks like Mike Pence will cast the deciding vote on that matter. But I thought we'd explore some different things that have been on your mind for a while, things you've thought about and wondered about, things I've thought about and wondered about for sure. And now more proof of it here today. Vizio, you've seen their TVs. One of the world's largest makers of smart TVs, paying a fine of $2.2 million, which seems pretty light to me, by the way, to settle charges that it has been collecting viewing habits from over 11 million devices without the knowledge or the consent of the people watching them. Now, according to the complaint filed Monday by the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, Internet-connected TVs from Vizio contained ACR. That's short for Automatic Content Recognition. That software was on the TVs without asking for permission. The ACR code captured second-by-second information about the video the TVs displayed. The software collected other personal information and transmitted it, along with the viewing data, to servers controlled by the manufacturer. Vizio would then sell the data to unnamed third parties for purposes of audience measurement, analysis, and tracking. Now, if Vizio can do that, yes, that's right, the government can do that. For all of these uses, defendants provide high-quality, highly specific, second-by-second information about television viewing. That's what FTC lawyers wrote in Monday's complaint. Each line of a report provides viewing information about a single television. That means you. In a securities filing, Vizio states that its data analytics program, for example, provides highly specific viewing behavior data on a massive scale with great accuracy, which can be used to generate intelligent insights for advertisers and media content providers. And let me just add, and the government. When you're worried about the TV watching you, and people said that's nonsense, it can't happen, it can happen. Just like Orwell talked about in 1984. Go to a certain part of the room so you can't be seen or heard. In an emailed statement, Vizio officials wrote the ACR program never paired viewing data with personally identifiable information. Well, how would you know that? Because a lot of smart TVs, obviously you can do your internet work there. You can pay bills online. What would there be to prevent a complete takeover? And of course, the allegations, just the latest, raise troubling privacy concerns about internet-connected TVs and other so-called Internet of Things devices. In late 2015, security researchers found that Vizio TVs failed to properly validate HTTPS certificates of servers they connected to when transmitting viewing habit data. That made it trivial for anyone who had the ability to monitor and control the internet traffic passing between the TV and the Vizio servers to impersonate the servers and view or tamper with the transmitted data. Smart TVs manufactured by LG have also been caught collecting potentially sensitive data, including a list of shows being watched, the names of files contained or connected on USB drives, and the names of files shared on home or office networks. There is no security there. Smart TVs are a bad idea, is what I'm saying. At least they are in my home. Under the terms of the settlement, Vizio will pay $1.5 million to the FTC because the government will sure use that money well, and $700,000 to the New Jersey Division of Consumer Affairs because you're sure that government will use it well. The settlement also requires Vizio to delete all data collected before March 1st, 2016. What about the data after March 1st, 2016? Huh? We're giving the government $1.5 million. What about the data collected recently over the last year? Vizio has agreed to prominently disclose and obtain express consent for all future data collection, which means the data collection continues. The data collection continues. And for those of you that don't want to read a 27-page, fine print contract, you just go down to the bottom, you say, I agree. Which is what a lot of people do now. I agree. Well, when you agree, you're agreeing to let somebody or something into your home. There's something that'll help you not sleep as well tonight, huh? All right. So if you're not stealing information, what if you're a robot stealing somebody's job? Well, if that's the case, it's best to stay hidden. That's what it appears Amazon and its teams are thinking. Jeff Bezos says his Seattle web giant has contemplated a 2-story automated grocery store in which a staff of robots on the floor upstairs grabs and bags items for the shoppers below. It's the ground level of the futuristic prototype, a supermarket-sized version of the recently unveiled Amazon Go convenience store with a bigger layout that could span up to 40,000 square feet. It would be devoted to goods that shoppers typically like to touch. Sources briefed on the plans have told the New York Post. Those could include as many as 4,000 items, spanning from fresh fruits and vegetables, egg, meat, cheese, grab-it-and-go stuff like beer and wine. Pharmacies might also spring up at some of the high-tech locations as Amazon looks to break into that lucrative cash sector. But for many, the most striking feature of these big Amazon stores, they could operate with as few as 3 employees at a time. Sources said the plans call for staff to max out at 10 workers per location during any given shift. Amazon will utilize technology to minimize labor, a source close to the situation told the New York Post. Job-cutting technology isn't new for Amazon, of course, which has increasingly used robots to automate its distribution warehouses, and more recently has been pioneering the use of drones to deliver packages instead of humans. In fact, if you haven't heard, Amazon now has the idea of unmanned blimps, flying warehouses, if you will. For real, flying warehouses of stuff, socks and mac and cheese and razors and whatever else it is you buy from Amazon, which for some folks is just about everything. These floating warehouses would have drones that would pick up your new set of razor blade heads and zip them right down to your house. Fly right out of the sky and drop it on your front porch. And when you talk about these automated warehouse grocery stores, wouldn't even need a credit card or anything else. You come through, iris scan, you're in the store, they know who you are, they know what you pick up. You walk out, you don't talk to anybody, you don't touch anything, you take your stuff, the bill arrives at home. Good or bad, you decide.
Getting your day started with news from around the state and around the world. Common Sense Radio. This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Somewhere out on that horizon, out beyond the neon.
All right, welcome back to it on this Tuesday. By the way, if you'd like to join the conversation at some point, I encourage you to do so. 888-900-9966. This hour of the program brought to you by DTE Energy, providing safe, reliable natural gas to businesses across Michigan. DTE Energy, know your own power. You've noticed it doesn't seem to matter. It doesn't really seem to matter what President Trump does. If he calls for lunch, it's a scandal in some circles. The left goes crazy over, well, pretty much anything he does or talks about. My next guest, Seton Motley, president of Less Government, here to talk more about Trump derangement syndrome, as some have come to call it. Seton, welcome back to the program.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. So Trump derangement syndrome, it started, I kind of got a chuckle of it here a few weeks ago, but it doesn't seem to go away. It gets worse. It doesn't matter what the man does. And there's some things he's done that people can have issue with. Maybe they don't like the security at the southern border, the way it's implemented. Maybe they don't like the travel ban. That's fine. Have an honest conversation about that. But they take it to personal attacks and personal levels, and it's bizarre, frankly.
And they object to a lot of things that really most Americans don't find that objectionable.
Well, that's true.
They're so wedded to the teachers' unions that of all the Trump appointees, the one they're going to the mat against is Betsy DeVos, the education secretary designate. And she's, the reason she's awful to them is because she doesn't, kneel to the teachers' unions. And they're going bananas on her. Meanwhile, they call Jeff Sessions a virulent racist, but he sails through the With some impediments, but he sails through the process. Of course, he's not a racist. It's completely absurd.
He's not, but he's not confirmed yet either.
Well, he will be this week. That's going through. The one they're going to the mat for is the one that the teachers' unions who write the government, the Democrat checks, oppose.
And some Republicans like Lisa Murkowski and Olympia Snow.
Remember Margaret Thatcher said, "Don't go wobbly." There are a lot of wobbly Republicans, but what's amazing to me is this abject terror on the part of the left. Which, by the way, there was an article in the Daily Call this morning about how the whole point of all of this is to render the government ungovernable, to try to create this sentiment that Trump's desire to disrupt the status quo in Washington is chaos. You've heard the word chaos 9 million times.
Well, I have. Well, here's what controversial. That word is attached as a qualifier to every network news program that Donald Trump is associated. Controversial this, controversial that. Everything's controversial. Heck, if he calls for lunch, it's controversial if he orders a sandwich instead of the soup.
Yeah, and again, they're trying to create this cacophony of chaos and controversial choices that cloud. Again, this doesn't work for people who pay attention. This only works for people who, drop in, for 22 minutes on the CBS Evening News or the NBC Nightly News, and don't really know.
But here's the thing:
that's all they hear.
The Trump supporters did pay attention. I think the Trump supporters did pay attention enough to know that they're looking at it, going, "Now wait a second, this guy's doing exactly what he said he was going to do. It's what we voted for."
And I wrote that in the piece. I said, to the average person, this is actually refreshing. He campaigned on X, Y, and Z. He won, and now he's implementing X, Y, and Z. That's fabulous. And, it's certainly refreshing given the political history of every politician ever, which is to run on X, Y, and Z and then not do X, Y, and Z once they get elected.
Well, I played a piece.
It's happening. And, one of the things, we've talked about this before, he tweeted in 2014, before he was even a candidate, that net neutrality was a terrible policy. Well, then he gets in office, and he appoints as head of the FCC, the commission that unilaterally imposed it.
Ajit Pai.
Ajit Pai, great guy. Parents are Indian immigrants to rural Kansas. How's that for culture shock when they got here?
Exactly.
And he is awesome, and he's now acting chairman. He should be full chairman in my estimation.
He will be.
He's moved towards rolling back the net neutrality.
And more important than that, to me, Pai has said, listen, anything that's going to happen, any changes, we're going to put it out there for at least 3 weeks for everybody to see before a vote is ever held. And the left goes crazy. I'm like
that. Yeah. What? Remember Obama claimed to be he wanted to be the most transparent administration in history. The commissioners. There are 5 commissioners on the FCC, one of whom also acts as chairman when it's fully populated. It's not currently fully populated, but it's 3-2 in favor of the president's party. When there was 3-2 Democrat under Obama, there'd be 600-page orders that they'd be voting on at 10 a.m. that the 2 Republican commissioners wouldn't get till 8:30 a.m.
That's right.
Let alone the public seeing it, the Republican commissioners wouldn't see it.
That's right.
And he opens it up to transparency for everybody, because that was one of the things the Republicans were begging for under Obama was, let the public see the order before you vote on it.
All right, let me ask you this.
They wouldn't even show the Republican commissioners.
Before we run out of time here, Seton Motley from Less Government, let me ask you this. We've got the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals weighing in on something that's been done since FDR, Truman, Reagan, Clinton, and that is the president has the right to control who comes to this country, immigrants, refugees, so on and so forth. Is this court going to rule fairly the way that the American jurisprudence has for decades? Or are they going to go after Donald Trump and say you can't do this?
It's called the Ninth Circus for a reason. I think somebody might surprise you on that. I think the majority might vote wrong, but I think we'll get a vote from somebody who we're like, wow. So that's a swerve into sanity by one judge or another. But I still think it has to go to the Supreme Court to actually get a constitutional ruling on this thing.
Right. A constitutional ruling for the president, the commander-in-chief, to protect, in his best estimate, the way he should protect America.
The magic phrase is plenary power. It's right there in the Constitution.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And every president has it, except apparently Donald Trump. But we'll see if the Ninth Circuit comes out. Seton Motley, always a good conversation, my friend. Have another cup of coffee.
I don't drink coffee. It looks good, smells great, and tastes terrible.
Well, you're allowed to be wrong once in a while. It's okay. Seton, I greatly appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
President of Less Government, Seton Motley there. Back in a moment. We're going to have David Kallman here on the program from the Great Lakes Justice Center. You're listening to The Steve Gruber Show.
Taking a closer look at the stories that affect you most with a big dose of common sense.
Get your motor running. Head out on the highway. Looking for adventure.
33 after the hour on this Tuesday. Joining me next, David Kallman, Senior Counsel for the Great Lakes Justice Center. A gentleman I've gotten to know over the last few years, was a listener to the program, as I recall, and called in and said, hey, I've got a couple of things we should talk about. And since that time, the Great Lakes Justice Center has really gotten its foundation and been involved with some important cases. David Kallman, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Steve. It's always great to be on.
Now, the U.S. Supreme Court transgender bathroom case on behalf of a National Christian Educators Association and the Michigan Association of Christian Schools is moving forward. Tell us about some of these cases, because they've garnered a lot of attention in the headlines. Of course, North Carolina was pummeled for their transgender bathroom laws and so forth. Where are we with this case? And just give the listeners a quick snapshot of what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the case of Gloucester versus Gloucester County School Board versus GG. The child goes by their initials. And it's a young woman who claimed to have a gender identity of being a male, and so wanted to use the bathrooms at the Gloucester County schools for males, was allowed to do so, and it created such a controversy. This is down in Virginia, and an uproar, and parents objecting that they reversed their policy and said, no, you had to use the bathroom and locker rooms that are based on your sex, your chromosomes, your genitalia, that sort of thing.
Right.
And so the Department of Education at the federal level, the U.S. Department of Ed, sent a letter to the school saying they could not do that they had to allow anyone who claimed a gender identity as being the opposite of what is objectively true, that you had to allow that student to use the other facilities. And that's what led to the lawsuit. And then about a year after they sent that letter to the school board, they sent out this general letter, the Department of Ed, to all the school districts in the country, telling them the same thing. And what's really ironic about this is it's all being done under Title IX, which was a federal law that was passed to create equality for women in sports and education and all sorts of things. It's done a lot of good things. And under Title IX, it specifically says schools can maintain separate facilities, and it allows specifically for schools to have separate toilet, locker room, and shower facilities on the basis of sex. And now the Department of Ed has just unilaterally redefined what the word sex means and is now requiring schools to basically violate the law.
I got a question for you here, David, because a couple of things. Number one, isn't it easy enough for these schools to have some unisex bathrooms? I mean, You see them everywhere. The bathroom in my house, by the way, unisex. So what difference does it really make? It just seems like we're creating this entire battle where it could be solved pretty easily, except that maybe schools don't have the time or the inclination to put in a bunch of new bathrooms. But if you put in a couple, the problem is solved, is it not?
Right. But you know what the problem is, Steve? That's just too much common sense. I mean, that's too logical. Come on. I mean,
we'll have none of that.
Here's what the Department of Ed is saying, is the school district must accommodate the gender identity student who's claiming it, and you must set up the separate facility for everyone else. Now, does that make sense to you?
No.
It says only non-transgendered students
here's
will be
the real
required
problem
to use
that I
separate
have.
facilities.
Here's the real problem that I have with all of this, and it moves beyond the bathrooms. But when you have transgendered students, if you will, transgendered female students, for example, a boy, biologically speaking, who wants to participate on the girls' basketball team because he feels like he's a girl, that's unacceptable to me. That's not Title IX. That's nonsense. And if my daughter is on a girls' basketball team that keeps 10 players in high school, and a boy comes along who says he feels like a girl, and she loses her place in the basketball team, that's not sitting well with me. Because the point of Title IX was to protect girls, make sure girls had equal opportunities. I don't think that we're serving anybody properly by undermining Title IX.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you think about it, I mean, gender identity, it's gender confusion is the way we look at it. And it's based on perception. It's based on preferences, which are subjective. The objective facts, the objective truth is just the opposite. Think of it like this, Steve. I come out today and I call you up and I say, hey, Steve, I'm the Pope today. I've got my hat, I've got the robes, I'm doing Mass. I'm the Pope.
But see, if you do that now, I get where you're going, but people are going to say you're a bigot, you're homophobic, you're all of these. I mean, that's what the game is.
Sure.
But the fact of the matter, I go back to the basketball team. I don't need a boy playing on the girls' basketball team if you have a co-ed team. That's one thing. But if you do not, you do not, and it can't be two ways. Because let me ask you this: if when you are a decedent, when you die, and you go to the coroner's office, the coroner, by law, must be biologically accurate and honest, which means he checks off you have a body of a 50-year-old male or female. You don't get to say 50-year-old, transgender. That means nothing.
Right.
I mean, biologically speaking, the coroner is required by law to do this. What are we going to tell the coroners? They can pick whatever box they want going forward? Come on.
Right. And again, it's common sense. And remember, under these things, of course we're going to get called names. Of course we're going to be called homophobes and everything else. But look, truth matters. And it matters when the government is trying to enforce policy. If a private company wants to pass a rule like this or whatever, that's up to them. But we should not be using the government to force and coerce the rest of the population to accept something that is objectively not true. And so, it's just common sense and common decency. You don't let some 50-year-old man, like the Planet Fitness lawsuit, come into the locker room where your 14-year-old teenage daughter might be, just because he says he feels like a woman, and shower with your daughter. Who in their right mind believes that that's okay? And that's what we're talking about. In fact, tonight in Jackson, Michigan, that's what the city council is voting on tonight. They're passing one of these ordinances, and it has all this transgender stuff in it. It's just unbelievable.
Well, tell me about that real quickly. We've got a couple of minutes here.
Yeah, the city of Jackson is looking at a non-discrimination ordinance that includes gender identity and sexual orientation, and they're claiming that there's all this discrimination going on. Well, of course, that's just objectively not true. There's no big, huge problem of discrimination against folks that have those types of beliefs or conduct in their life. But they're wanting to enforce that on everyone else, and they're wanting to require someone else who believes in truth, who believes their identity is based maybe in their religious faith or is based in some other important aspect of their life,
sure,
to now have to acquiesce and participate in events and religious ceremonies and parades.
Yeah, to
like
each their own, don't tread on me is where I go back to, I'm a Gadsden kind of a guy, I suppose. David Kallman, Senior Counsel at the Great Lakes Justice Center. Give me an idea. If people want to follow these cases that you're involved with, I'm sure you must post some updates on your website.
Like we did a friend of the court brief in the U.S. Supreme Court case. We filed it a couple weeks ago. It's greatlakesjc.org. So go to the website, and you can see all the different cases and things we're involved in.
GreatLakesJC.org. David Kallman, always a pleasure, my friend.
Same here. Thanks.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much. All right, it's 41 after the hour. Sometimes we get bogged down in the details of these messes, and I think that we need to keep our eye on the priorities that we have, the things that bring us together, and not the things that tear us apart. But common sense is clearly lacking in some of these conversations from time to time, in my estimation. Today's program brought to you in part by DTE Energy, providing safe, reliable natural gas for businesses across Michigan. DTE Energy, know your own power. This is The Steve Gruber Show.
The Steve Gruber Show, American values with Midwestern common sense.
If you listen to this program, you know that I am no fan of smoking. I don't tell you whether you can or cannot, but I am no fan of smoking as a general rule. 500,000 people in America will die this year from smoking. That's 12 or 1,400 today from smoking-related diseases, esophageal cancer, tongue cancer, lung cancer, emphysema, a whole host of diseases directly related to smoking. It's one of the leading causes of preventable death in America. But should we be requiring people to be 21 before they smoke? I don't know if that's our place either. State Senator Rick Jones here with us today to discuss that that point. Senator, welcome back.
Good morning.
Ever been a smoker?
Never, ever.
You're a good man. I was at one time. I quit on the 1st of June, 1999. And then, like so many former smokers, I became a, militant about it, But I just don't think there's a future. But what is this conversation about raising the smoking age, 18, 19, 20 maybe?
Well, if they want to put it on the ballot, so be it. Let people decide. But the city of Ann Arbor, sometimes called by people the People's Republic of Ann Arbor.
Hey, I'm one of those people. Go on.
Just decided that they would make a city ordinance that would usurp state law. So they passed a city ordinance that said 18, 19, and 20-year-olds could not purchase cigarettes in the city. Now, who did that hurt? It's not going to change anybody's smoking behavior because all the 18, 19, 20-year-olds are going to drive a few blocks and buy cigarettes just outside the city. But who it hurts are the little mom-and-pop shops, gas stations, party stores, groceries, that all of a sudden lose income because the city wants to make a statement. Now, talk about hypocritical. This is the same city that encourages marijuana smoking. They have the hash bash, and they don't really do anything about it. They have a tiny little minuscule fine for smoking marijuana because they basically encourage that. But heaven forbid that an 18, 19, 20-year-old adult could purchase a cigarette in their city.
Isn't that the craziest thing, though? Don't smoke cigarettes. Smoke all the weed you want. It's okay. I mean, it doesn't even make sense. I mean, how can people have the belief that smoking cigarettes will kill you, but smoking marijuana will cure cancer? I mean, I see this nonsense on the internet. Smoking marijuana will cure cancer. Of course it will. Yeah.
Well, and where does it stop? If we allow a city to say we're going to usurp state law, the next thing they'll do is say nobody in our city can own a handgun.
Well, they'd like to do that now, wouldn't they? I mean, they'd like that one right now. Here's the thing, though. I thought communist states like Ann Arbor embraced smoking. I mean, I see all the big communists like Mao and Stalin. I thought they were all smokers. What went wrong?
Well, I think the city council has decided that they know better than everybody else, and they're going to tell everybody what their behavior should be.
Well, that's right, because they know better. Well, the problem. See, I have a problem here because I know that smoking causes diseases. I know that 500,000 people will die this year in America because of smoking-related diseases. I know that. The cost of the healthcare system to businesses in Michigan and across this country are enormous. And I know that, and you know that. But on the same token, how far do we regulate people's behavior? And I think that I'm libertarian for the most part on this one. I don't think we should necessarily.
Well, again, if they want to go to the ballot and gather the signatures and say we're going to raise the age of smoking to 21 across the board, treat everybody the same, that would be one thing. But to say they're going to have a standalone city ordinance and usurp state law, I have to stand up and fight that.
Agreed, because like you say, where does it end? All right, what else is going on in Lansing that the listeners around the state need to know about that you think is on the radar screen?
Well, for years, cities, townships, and even counties have passed a patchwork of laws saying that when you replace the water pipes, they have to be iron. Well, the problem with this is nowadays there's a lot more frugal ways of doing it. In fact, Dow can tell you right here in Michigan, the Dow Chemical can tell you we have plastic pipes that the cities could be using that would save millions of dollars. So I have a bill that I'll be introducing this week that simply says get a bid from anybody that is authorized by Michigan Water Works that says here is a pipe that will do the same thing, and let's try to save people some money. Let's save taxpayers the money.
Well, that makes sense. And buy a Michigan product.
Well, absolutely.
Buy a Michigan-made product, bring jobs. Create however many jobs it might create. It might only be a few, but a few is better than none. And if you got pipes that are cheaper, safer, and by the way, don't leach toxic chemicals when they age, wouldn't that be the best way? Plus, when you're transporting them, they're much lighter. You use less fuel to get them there, less energy to put them in the ground. They last just as long, I would think, if not longer, as long as they're below the frost line, big water lines, so they don't crack, right?
Well, Dow Chemical and other companies have come up with a product that is successful. They did it in the community of Buena Vista here in Michigan. And if we have better products, we certainly ought to be looking at them. We shouldn't have archaic laws that force cities to buy something that maybe has outlived its time. Well,
and there you go. So I think that's probably a smart plan. And, well, if you can save us some money, we'd all appreciate it because we're just trying to pay that gas tax right now and keep up, So it is.
Hopefully we'll have some better roads this summer as they work on it.
When does that roll out? Does that finally start this summer? At least they get rolling on it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. MDOT and the local community should all have orange barrels all over the place.
I'm so excited. Makes driving so much more exciting. Senator Jones, always a pleasure.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Senator Rick Jones here on the program. It is 52 after. You're listening to the Steve Gruber Show on a Tuesday. We'll be right back.
This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it off.
Stop.
Yeah,
Stop. I mean, you're way off script.
got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Been a long education.
Yeah, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
All right. It is Tuesday here on the program. Glad to have you with us for the conversation today. If you'd like to join the conversation along the way, 888-900-9966, 888-900-9966. You can drop in your comments, your concerns. The United States Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals will hear arguments today on Donald Trump's travel ban from 7 nations, the temporary ban from 7 nations, including Somalia, Iraq, Iran, Libya, Yemen. You get it. He will have his executive order on the line. Now, it's interesting that through the plenary power of the president, every president has had the ability to limit those coming into this nation from other countries. Barack Obama did it 19 times to different degrees. Ronald Reagan did it 5 times. Bill Clinton a dozen. Jimmy Carter half a dozen times. It goes back to FDR, Harry Truman. They all did it. The question is, what's going to happen? So that's going on today. Betsy DeVos also front and center today. Her confirmation as Secretary of Education coming down to the wire today. Mike Pence, it appears at this point, will likely be casting the deciding vote as the vice president to break a 50-50 tie in the U.S. Senate. As we heard earlier, some believe that her ties that don't include the teachers' unions are the biggest challenge facing her as she moves forward in this confirmation process, but it looks like she's going to make it. Jeff Sessions should also make it this week. A lot going on, so we'll see how that plays out. Hey, by the way, there's a report out that there is low morale among ISIS fighters now. Low morale. In fact, some, believe it or not, using doctor's notes about suffering from back pain and other issues so they don't have to go fight. This is from the Washington Post, reporting that Iraqi forces who took over an ISIS base in Mosul found a document lamenting 14 problem fighters from the Tariq bin Ziyad battalion. On the surface, reports that militants are on the ropes in former stronghold cities appears to be a good thing, but some disenfranchised members may work their way back to Europe, and that's a big concern. He doesn't want to fight. He wants to go back to France one note said about a 24-year-old Algerian man, a resident of France, claims his will is martyrdom operation in France, claims sick but doesn't have a medical report, and the list goes on. I find it hard to believe. Hard to believe that those fighting on the front line of Islamic terror are worn out by seeing people blown up, maimed, mutilated, killed, and slaughtered. Maybe that's a good sign for things to come, but I wouldn't get too fired up over it quite yet. All right, something else I wanted to touch base with you on and talk to you about is this. And that is another executive order, the one ordering a physical barrier, a wall at the southern border to restrict the number of illegals that flow into America. And, of course, this triggered the whole conversation about sanctuary cities. Another executive order where Donald Trump says we need to consider not funding sanctuary cities. If they continue to break the law, then we should not send them federal dollars, your tax dollars and mine. I agree. That mechanism has been used many times by many presidents for many initiatives. But with all that going on, California decides that it wants to be a sanctuary state, or at least that conversation is going on, and it looks like that's probably going to happen. Senate President Pro Tem Kevin De Leon from Los Angeles, a Democrat, of course, decided that during the conversation for Senate Bill 54, SB 54, he decided to admit that half of his family is here illegally and that they have all sorts of illegal items in their possession, like illegal driver's licenses, Social Security cards, green cards, all fabricated, all falsified, all fraudulently created. Yes. All fraudulently created, so they're here breaking the law and then getting false IDs and green cards, Social Security cards so they can get benefits, I would assume. And by the way, when that happens, somebody oftentimes is the victim of identity theft. And if you don't believe me, listen to what he said. Here is what he said. Senate President Pro Tem Kevin De Leon of California. Go ahead and roll it.
The reality is, with the executive order and the criteria that has been developed, any individual, I can tell you half of my family would be eligible for deportation under the executive order. Because if they got a false Social Security card, if they got a false identification, if they got a false driver's license prior to us passing AB 60, if they got a false green card, and anyone who has family members, who are undocumented knows that almost entirely everybody has secured some sort of false identification. That's what you need to survive, to work. They are eligible for massive deportation.
Massive deportation, that's right. They're here illegally. They're collecting illegal identification, counterfeit driver's licenses, counterfeit Social Security cards, counterfeit green cards, all criminal activity. All criminal activity. And like I said, people that suddenly come up missing their Social Security card or number become the victims of that fraud, become identity theft victims of that fraud. And at what cost is that? Do you know anybody who's been through identity theft? It's an ordeal, to say the least. It is a horrible ordeal. Donald Trump, of course, says the idea of sanctuary cities is ridiculous. He's very much opposed to them, he says, and says they breed crime. There are a lot of problems. Of course, De Leon and the others on the left say that the illegal aliens are law-abiding citizens. Well, except for the fact that they're here illegally and making illegal driver's licenses to stay here illegally with illegal identification. Other than that, they're here perfectly legally and causing no trouble, except that they could be voting. But, of course, that wouldn't happen. They'll get an illegal driver's license, an illegal Social Security card, an illegal green card, but they would never vote. You see, because they just wouldn't do that. I mean, do you see the absurdity? Do you understand the absurdity of what you're being asked to digest, to swallow? They'll do all of these things. And when the President Pro Tem of the Democrats for the Senate, for the state Senate of California, says half of his family is here illegally. Half of his family is here illegally with illegal papers and identification. They're here illegally. They would be they would be eligible for mass deportation. That's right. He says he has family members who came here specifically illegal and stayed with illegal identification and papers. And that's what they're endorsing. 14 after, you're listening to The Steve Gruber Show.
Keeping you in touch with Michigan and the world.
Well, clearly, President Trump exaggerated over the weekend when he said the Patriots would win by 8 points. They only won by 6. Clearly reckless with his predictions. At least that's what I would hear from the left, I would suspect. By the way, if Tom Brady could have gone for 2, he would have, and the team would have won by 8, making the president's prediction exactly right. Of course, I say that tongue-in-cheek. My next guest, Alex Stroman, RNC spokesperson, here to talk about more serious things. Alex, welcome to the program.
Hi, great to be with you.
Glad to have you here. One of the big battles, of course, on the horizon after today, of course, we've got the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals taking a look at the president's executive order on a temporary ban on immigrants and refugees from 7 countries. And then once we get past that, if we get past that, we go to Neil Gorsuch, the nominee to be a justice on the Supreme Court. But these two things could, in fact, be linked. If the Ninth Circuit denies the president's plenary powers, which every president that I remember has always had, then it could end up in front of the Supreme Court, and Neil Gorsuch could be part of that conversation, could he not?
Well, I think that's a certain possibility, but I think that it's important that this president wins this case for the Ninth Circuit. I mean, you've had other judges, federal judges across the country, that he did exactly what he was well within his rights to do. This executive order was about keeping Americans safe first and foremost, and so that's been this president's focus the entire time, and he did exactly what he said he was going to do. He said he was going to institute this temporary ban so we could see what's going on with the program. It targets just a couple of countries that the Obama administration said were places where they didn't have the proper vetting procedures, and then we'll continue on. But this is absolutely just one example of this president getting to work and just roadblocks being thrown up in his way, and he's only on week 3.
Well, and here's the situation, though. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is the most liberal of all the courts in America. Everybody knows that. You could get a vote or two for sanity, but I'm going to guess, and maybe I'll be proven wrong here, Alex, but I'm going to guess the Ninth Circuit is going to uphold this temporary restraining order that came from this judge in Washington, a 6-page decision, by the way. It's the shortest, weakest, thinnest decision I've ever seen. The court in Boston actually had it right, 21 pages, a lot more citations when it comes to legal precedent and so forth. But I hold out no hope for the Ninth Circuit.
Well, that's one thing about the Ninth Circuit. It's one of those areas where it's tougher. But again, if any judge looks at the law and looks at this president's actions, he was well within his law, well within his rights as president, and this is again about keeping Americans safe. And so we'd hope that any judge, whether it's in one of the more philosophies of the court that don't hold, like Judge Gorsuch, or the little bit not as favorable circuits of the court, we hope that they'd see the exact same thing, because this president exactly acted well within the law.
Well, and that's going to be we're going to see what happens with that. Now, as far as Gorsuch goes, a guy who won 95-0 the last time around, supported by Senator Obama, Senator Clinton, Senator Schumer, and the list goes on and on. 95-0. So controversial was Gorsuch the first time around that the Democrats didn't even bother to show up for the hearing, which is they do a lot that lately too as well. But you see how that works, Alex? They didn't show up then. They don't show up now. They show up whenever they want to throw a protest, I suppose, and do a sit-in on the floor of the Senate or the House on occasion. Go ahead.
Well, then, back in 2006, not showing up, they didn't show up because they were protesting him. They didn't show up because they were supporting him, because he was so uncontroversial at the time that, like you said, not a single Democrat. And look, he passed both the committee and the Senate without any opposition. And there are still 12 Democrats. You talk about Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama who support him. There are still 12 Democrat senators who supported him in 2006 who are still in the Senate. Guess who some of them are? Chuck Schumer, Dianne Feinstein, Dick Durbin, Pat Leahy, and others. 12 Democrats who supported him in 2006, who he was not controversial at all. They didn't even stand up, even ask him a question. And yet now, 10 years later, 11 years later, Democrats are standing up against Judge Gorsuch. Neil Katyal, who wrote in the New York Times op-ed, he was Solicitor General for Barack Obama, and he wrote about how qualified Judge Gorsuch was, one of the top choices that could possibly be made to the court, even though he didn't agree with a lot of them philosophically. If you look at Rachel Maddow of MSNBC called Judge Gorsuch a mainstream choice. And so what you're seeing from Democrats is exactly what you see from Democrats for constant years. They're just protesting this president. Any decision he makes, they're going to scream and cry and pitch a fit about. And it's absolutely unfortunate for our process because Judge Gorsuch is extremely well qualified, exceptionally well qualified. And again, he was so uncontroversial 11 years ago that not a single Democrat had any opposition to him.
I think that what we need to keep an eye on are senators from states like Indiana, Missouri, North Dakota, West Virginia, Montana, Michigan, because these are states that were won by Donald Trump, where the Democratic incumbent senator is up for re-election in 2018. And some of those states like West Virginia, North Dakota, Indiana were won by such wide margins that trying to block Donald Trump at this point could be the end of somebody's political career. They may do it anyway, but I doubt it. I look at somebody like Joe Manchin, and I say, I see a guy there that's probably going to vote for Neil Gorsuch.
Well, he's taking a meeting with him, and which is good. He's doing his job like the people of West Virginia elected him to do. But, Debbie Stabenow is a senator in 2006 who voted for Judge Gorsuch, had zero problems with him 11 years ago, but now is objecting to him. And so, yeah, you're right. We need to hold these politicians accountable for not only just opposing this president literally on every. I think if he coughs or sneezes, Democrats just get all in hysteria.
Well, and here's the other thing that Debbie Stabenow faces. The problem that Debbie Stabenow faces here in Michigan, where I'm based, is that even though it was a narrow margin, 10,700 votes plus or minus one or two, this state went to Donald Trump. And if she comes out openly hostile to Neil Gorsuch and blocks Donald Trump's agenda, you'll also find that in off-year elections, Republicans have a tendency to turn out in greater numbers, although we do have a race for governor coming up in 2 years and have a fairly unpopular governor currently in the state house. So I guess we'll see how that all plays out. But I think that she is playing with fire potentially there. Alex, I'll give you the last word, 20 seconds.
Well, I think it's just important for folks there to hold her accountable, to hold your elected officials accountable. If you see him crying and screaming and standing up to this president, it probably means because he's doing exactly what he said he was going to do in the campaign, and that's why the people of Michigan and the people all around the country elected Donald Trump as president. And
there you have it. I greatly appreciate it, Alex. Thanks for stopping so in. All right, Alex Stroman, everybody, RNC chair and or RNC spokesperson, I should say, not the chair. That's still our good friend. Back in a moment.
Getting your day started with news from around the state and around the world. Common Sense Radio. This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Tuesday here on the show. This part of the program brought to you by DTE Energy, providing safe, reliable natural gas to businesses across Michigan. DTE Energy, know your own power. By the way, 2 new affiliates coming this month. I'll tell you about that when they power up, and a couple more next month from what it looks like. We continue to grow the conversation across the great state of Michigan, from Marquette to Monroe and all points in between. Glad to have you on board. My next guest, Congressman Dan Kildee from Michigan's 5th District, a Democrat there. Congressman, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me back. How are you?
I'm doing well, sir. Yourself?
Not too bad.
Not too bad. Well, you're in the circus of Washington. It might wear a fella out after a while, I would think.
Yeah, it's an interesting place. That's for sure. Always is.
I would guess. So let's start with this. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals to hear today on Donald Trump's temporary ban of refugees and immigrants from 7 nations. It's something that presidents have done for a long, long time. Where do you stand on this issue?
Well, I oppose the ban as it's constructed. I think there are 2 questions that the court will have to answer. One, which I think will probably almost certainly side with the president, and that is whether he has the unilateral authority to institute measures to protect Americans from, protect our borders. And I think there's a broad recognition over the years that presidents have broad authority when it comes to this question, so long as no constitutional provision is violated. And I think the thing the court is going to have to answer, when one reads the actual language of the executive order, which is kind of an important thing for people to do, and when it shows that there is a clear bias, in fact, a an overt statement that potential Muslim refugees are the lowest priority, have to go to essentially the back of the line.
No, it didn't say that. It didn't say that actually in the order. I read the order.
Actually,
I didn't see that.
Well, I not only have read it, I read it on a regular basis.
All right.
What it says. So you can say it doesn't say that, but what it says is that here are 7 Muslim countries, and religious minorities come first, which means majority is Muslim, and so the majority religion, people who happen to be adherents of the faith of Islam, have a lower priority. So
do you think the idea of the temporary ban is right, and that is to keep America safe? Do you think maybe because you say the way it was constructed, the way it was put together was clumsy, and I don't think there's any denying that. To me, it looks like a rookie mistake the way it was put together and rolled out. It was not handled well. It's a new administration. That part of their cabinet's still not there. And maybe if it was written in a better way, would you support it if it was written more properly?
Well, I mean, I would support measures that increase or strengthen the vetting process, but I don't see how this makes us safer, because you can't ignore the implication of how it is framed and how it's administered in terms of the safety of the United States. The point being, and this is Democrats and Republicans saying this, we have to be really careful. Some of this stuff does not fall into typical partisan boundaries. Democrats and Republicans, professionals in national security, are concerned that the way it is framed, the reasoning behind it, the way the president promised it would be a Muslim ban and then went to Rudy to figure out how to do it within the framework of the law, it's still intended to be that. The effect that has on our security can't be ignored, because what we're seeing is basically the validation of what those radicals are saying, is that the United States has an anti-Muslim bent or anti-Muslim bias.
But can't we look at, wouldn't it be fair, Congressman, to look at Paris or Nice or other places where people came in under the guise of being refugees and were involved with mass terrorist attacks? Paris and Nice, France, both being very obvious examples of that.
Yeah, I think a better example would be examples like the terrorism that took place here in the United States, where the 9/11, which is actually cited in defense of the ban. Think about it. I mean, Kellyanne Conway, others have said, think about 9/11. Well, if you want to think about 9/11, the Saudis.
No, I don't disagree with you there, but we have a long, complicated relationship with Saudi Arabia where they have, military hardware that we give them. It's long and complicated. I don't disagree with you that, you look, was it 17 out of the 19 hijackers originated in Saudi Arabia? Whatever the number is, it was the vast majority, and maybe that should be looked at closer. But I don't want to spend all of our time on one thing. Let's talk about the border wall. If we're going to talk about other things that are creating a lot of angst, if you will, on different sides of this issue, the border wall. What do you think about stronger enforcement, the border wall, and what's happening with that executive order?
Well, we clearly obviously have to control our borders. I just listen to people who know more about sort of technically what makes sense in terms of the border, like Congressman Will Hurd, a Republican, a guy who worked in national security, is a relatively new member, but really smart guy, and lives and works down there, says, yeah, we have to have more secure borders, but a wall is basically stupid. Let's make sure we do what we need to do to get it right. And then this notion that somehow Mexico is going to pay for it, when what the president actually suggests is that U.S. consumers pay for it with a border tax. That's not Mexico paying for it. So the details matter on this stuff. And the concern I've had, there's a couple concerns I have with the president's initial steps here. One, I think we can have a legitimate argument over the policy, like I just said, as to whether the wall and or the use of technology. We clearly need to secure the border. I don't disagree with that. But let's just get it right. Let's be smart. Let's not decide because I said it once in a 440-character tweet, and now I'm going to spend $15 billion to do something that really might not be the smartest use of $15 billion. Let's just get this stuff right and not be stuck essentially trying to prove talking points that he used in the campaign as if they are well-formulated policy.
We're on the line with Democratic Congressman Dan Kildee from Michigan's 5th District here today on the program. You sound like a guy who's going to have a conversation about all of these things to some extent. Now, you might come down with positions that the president doesn't agree with or other people don't agree with, but you're willing to have the conversation, unlike some of your colleagues who basically say, we're not going to work with this guy at all for any reason. And in fact, the word impeachment being thrown around 2 weeks into an administration, that seems a little bit extreme to me, but it doesn't sound like you're on that. You're in that group.
No, I mean, we have one president at a time. And, my job is to find ways, find common ground. I think there is a possibility, for example, when it comes to trade, that we Democrats, many of us anyway, could find common ground with President Trump on issues related to trade. And when we find areas of disagreement, we should be as strong as we can in pushing back. But we have one president at a time, and I think any talk like that, I actually think is counterproductive because it actually undermines the legitimate criticisms that I and others have, because it's seen as having a conclusion without actually having the argument and seeing how that argument plays out. I prefer that approach.
Yeah, a conclusion in search of a cause is what that sounds like, and it seems, I agree with you, it sounds counterproductive. We do have one president at a time, and whether you agree or disagree, the work to find common ground, I think, is incumbent on both sides. Congressman, I'll give you 15 seconds for the last word.
Well, I appreciate, the approach you take. I think we're going to disagree and agree from time to time, but that is what our democracy is all about. It's how it's supposed to work. So let's embrace that and not avoid it. So
robust discussion. Congressman, always a pleasure. Robust discussion is what we're all about, sir, and I greatly appreciate you coming. As always, we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
There it is. Congressman Dan Kildee from Michigan's 5th District, a Democrat and a guy who's, not screaming for impeachment, just screaming for a conversation. Back after this.
Covering Michigan and the world from his bunker below the bridge. Here is Steve Gruber.
It's 45 after. If you'd like to join me for the last few minutes of the program, I've got some open time here. If you're interested in the comments made by the Senator Pro Tem from the state of California saying half of his family would be sent out of the country, deported, if they were caught because they're here illegally and they have illegal driver's licenses and illegal Social Security cards, but they're law-abiding citizens, and of course they would never, ever vote. Or if you got comments on Congressman Kildee or anything else you'd like to talk about, I think, I'm just going to say I think he's a stand-up guy. He comes in here. He knows that him and I don't agree on a lot of things, but he's pretty straightforward. He's calm. I think he has credibility, I guess is what I'm going to say to you. And I appreciate having him here because not a lot of Democrats will come here because they feel that they're going to have a tough conversation. Well, yeah, they're going to have a tough conversation, but it's going to be a fair conversation. And so, again, I tip my hat to Dan Kildee for being willing to stand up and have that conversation. On the hotline, Jennifer checking in. She's never afraid to have a conversation. Jennifer, welcome to the program.
Hello, and thank you so much. But where was Dan Kildee when Mr. Obama was violating the law? That's the only question I have of him.
Well, I've got a couple like that.
The other thing is Mr. De Leon needs to be thrown out of office. I've worked since I've been 16 years old. I retired at 70. I did everything the right way. The illegals come in here. They get a Social Security card. They get payments and checks. What about the people that have worked their whole life, adhered to the letter of the law? The Social Security hasn't been increased in God knows when. I think, one pittance of 1% or one quarter of 1% the last time before Obama left office? Mm-hmm. How dare they? How dare Mr. De Leon take and protect the people that come in here illegally? They want to come in the United States. You come in according to the laws and regulations of this country. You learn our language. You learn our customs. And if you can't do that, please do us all a favor. Stay where you're at.
Well, that's what Teddy Roosevelt said, Jennifer. TR said, you can come here for 5 years if you don't learn the language. get a job, start contributing. You can go back to wherever it is you came from. Jennifer, I greatly appreciate your comments as always. The hotline number, 888-900-9966. I think Teddy Roosevelt, TR, was right then. The same should apply today. Come assimilate. Be an American. Be part of America. But don't come here and try to change America into whatever country it is you had to run from because it was such a terrible place that you want to turn America into whatever it is you fled. It makes no sense whatsoever. Todd on the line in Whitmore Lake. Todd, welcome to the program.
Morning.
How are you?
That senator, okay. That senator out of California that stood up and grandstanded and gave his speech about half his family, in my opinion, needs to be investigated. Take those illegals and have them deported, as well as himself for harboring fugitives.
You know, that's a good idea. If he knows where they are, knows they're breaking the law, knows they have counterfeit, illegal, fake driver's licenses, Social Security cards, green cards, fake papers. He seemed to know pretty well about it, Todd. Maybe you're right. I mean, how else would we approach it?
Yeah, exactly. But even not only that, investigate him to see how much he's been skimming off that, too.
It's a good point you've made, Todd. Thanks for checking in. The hotline number is 888-900-9966. I suppose that's true. The Senator Pro Tem, Kevin De Leon from California, saying that half of his family would be deported if they were caught because they're here illegally. Plus, they have illegal driver's licenses, Social Security cards, green cards, all counterfeit. And that creates the problem of identity theft. All right, where are we going? All right, we got the lines stacking up, and Alex is going to give me some directional here. Just waiting for, say that again? All right, Bill. Bill, you're the next one up here on the Steve Gruber Show. Welcome to it.
Thank you, Steve. Long-time listener, love your show.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say that I've known Dan and his family for over 40 years, and I was a school teacher here in Clinton, taught most of his family, and know him personally. He's a heck of a guy, and he attended the inauguration, unlike some of his colleagues.
Yes,
I've been
60.
a Republican since I campaigned in 1964 for Barry Goldwater, so I've been around for a while. But he's the only guy that I split the ticket for this year. So
there you go. So Dan Kildee is a stand-up guy, just like I said.
He sure is.
He's I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but you know what? He's one to stand in there and have the conversation and not hide behind talking points and so on and so forth. Greatly appreciate it, Bill. Appreciate the call. Chris is on the line calling in from Richland. Chris, welcome to the program.
Good morning. You know, as I listen to everybody who's talking about this immigration issue, to me it boils down to the rule of law. That whether you're here legally or illegally, or whether you're a congressman or even a CEO or just a guy going down the road, the thing I keep on hearing is that we want the equal application of the rule of law, period. You're not exempt because you're in Congress, and you're not exempt if you're rich, and you're not exempt if you came here under, even miserable conditions. You have to follow our law. You can't steal our Social Security cards. You can't commit fraud.
But if you came here illegally, aren't you here illegally? And therefore, based on that alone, I mean, some people should say they should go. Some say they should not, Chris. It's a tough conversation to have. Greatly appreciate it. The rule of law is not equally applied. That's part of the problem, I believe. Suzanne checking in St. John. Suzanne, welcome to it.
Hi. I'm going back to the refugees thing. I think Donald Trump should immediately allow Cubans to come in, which would show this judge for the hypocrite that he is. He didn't rule against Obama when Obama abruptly stopped Cubans coming here.
At the border, turned them around right at the border just before he left office, 2 days, in fact. You're right, Suzanne. Nobody squawked about that, did they? No, they didn't. I can sneak in a couple more calls after the break about the immigration, and Kevin De Leon saying half of his family would be deported if they knew the truth about them. We'll be back on the Steve Gruber Show. All right, it's 55 after the hotline number, 888-900-9966. Here's something, while we're talking about immigration and so forth. Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, a reliable Trump ally, moving forward on a different idea, not just on illegal immigration, but to reduce the amount of legal immigration we take into the United States each year, which could set up a showdown between the working class populists, led by Donald Trump, and, of course, the establishment Chamber of Commerce wing that always wants the cheap labor. The conservative rising star Tom Cotton poised to step into the role of being vacated by Jeff Sessions, who has long preached the economic virtues of restricting legal immigration in favor of existing United States citizens. What a concept. John is checking in from Portage on the hotline. John, welcome to the conversation.
Good morning, Steve. Everyone that's talking about this stuff is forgetting that constitutional right to ignore the federal law. I mean, I don't know why everybody misses that point, even though the Constitution specifically gives immigration to the federal government. But how can people ignore that? I mean, I hear all the progressives citing everything's a constitutional violation. And now I guess this sanctuary cities, that has a constitutional right to ignore federal law.
If I'm not mistaken, John, I believe that the plenary powers of the President of the United States are clearly outlined in the Constitution, and the President has the right under the 1952 Immigration Act and the updated version in 1965 to control those that come to this country legally, illegally, however they may get here, refugees. I believe that falls under the President's list of to-do. Am I right or wrong?
Well, it is a political question, number one. It's within the policing power of the executive, number two.
That's what I thought.
And the federal judge that sits there doesn't have all the information that the executive that is required to execute the laws and protect the country has, so a federal judge can't get into it. And ultimately, if it ever gets to the Supreme Court, they're going to say it's a political question, and the president has that power, and we're not taking that power away from them.
That's right. All right, John, thank you for checking in, listening to WKMI Kalamazoo, checking in from Portage. This conversation will continue tomorrow, I'm quite convinced, because we're going to find out probably today what the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has to say. At least we'll keep a close eye on it for you. And Betsy DeVos, we'll find out about her. Until tomorrow, keep the faith, my friends. I'm Steve Gruber. This is The Steve Gruber Show.